It was sort of like one of those light bulb moments for me. My understanding is that structured versus unstructured data refers to, we used to have all these data entry roles where you were taking data and entering it into fields for spreadsheets, for example. And until you created structure around the data that you were using, it was unusable. And unstructured data is the reverse, which is sort of the way that we normally communicate in documents and text-heavy files. One of the reasons that Gen AI could be such a breakthrough is that we can actually use that unstructured data now to make predictive outcomes from it or ask it questions and talk to it, which was impossible to do before.
I think of structured data as data that's like organized in a predefined format. You think of Excel spreadsheets and databases, like you were saying, and they're easily searchable and you can analyze them and you can see why that data is easy to train an algorithm. And so you can imagine financial records or inventory data, or even in the legal context, opinions are somewhat structured, right? They follow a format. Statutes are somewhat structured, and Wes and our other legal overlords have structured them even more sometimes, right? They've really put them in a format that makes them searchable. And I think of unstructured data as, emails and audio recordings and social media posts and the ways in which we live our lives in words, either in writing or in speaking, that all of a sudden that unstructured data is now valuable in the context of this technology. Welcome to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law, your go-to podcast focused on exploring the transformative impact of artificial intelligence on the legal industry. We're your hosts, Bridget McCormick and Jen Leonard, and together we'll navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, uncovering the opportunities, addressing the risks, and imagining the future.
In each episode, we bring you insightful discussions about cutting-edge technologies, the latest trends, actionable strategies, case studies, and novel insights that help your organization imagine its own future.
Whether you're a legal professional, a tech enthusiast, or simply curious about the future of law, this podcast is your gateway to understanding the profound changes AI will bring to the profession. Join us as we scale education and empower the legal community to thrive in an era of unprecedented innovation.
Welcome to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. Welcome back, everybody, to our podcast series, 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. I am your co-host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, and I am privileged and honored always to co-host this series with Bridget McCormick, who is president and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. The reason we started this podcast is because the two of us together have the opportunity to present to lots of different groups in the legal profession and the opportunity to co-teach courses to law students on generative technology. But we realize that many people in the day-to-day busyness of their lives don't have the chance to really slow down and try to understand what the technology is, what its fundamental principles are, some helpful definitions and use cases. So we wanted to create a space to do just that for the legal profession. So we're thrilled to be here today. Hi, Bridget. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. I'm excited about our conversation today, as always. So much going on.
So on today's episode, we're really excited to talk to our audience members who are practicing in solo firms or small practices. The questions that I've been hearing are very different than the ones that I hear from when I talk with people from big law or legal tech communities. So we thought it might be valuable to share some of the FAQs that we're getting, and we'll continue to do that in future episodes as well, because it's probably a community that does not have as much access to some of the most cutting edge technology or the conversations about it. But let's get started in the way we usually do. We always have a Gen AI moment that each of us has experienced since our last recording, that moment where we sort of recognize how magical this technology can be and very strange and mysterious. And so, Bridget, I'm curious what your Gen AI moment has been since our last recording.
Yeah, this one is again, I'm pulling in my team here, but my team has been experimenting with a product called HeyGen, which is a generative AI video generation set of tools that integrates with ChatGPT. And we are using it, like probably many others are, for both internal training videos and also, I'm going to loosely call it marketing videos, but really short videos to sort of tell the public or our users about some of our services and some of the specific tools and products that we offer. And so we have lots of different people across the organization. Again, you heard from our conversation in the last episode that I'm a believer in pulling people from across your organization into using this technology. And we've done that with HeyGen as well. And the different team members, none of them are at all experienced in video creation. And that's what's magical about this particular platform. And again, maybe there'll be many others like it. We're not here to endorse certain products, but we are using this HeyGen platform, and it's really incredible how it can turn a text script into a video. It has these avatars you can use. It can translate it into whatever language you need. And it's so user-friendly that you don't have to have any background in being able to make a little video, and you can just create these really effective tools. So just for one example, you can imagine some of the obvious educational and marketing use cases, but one of our team members who is working on getting our data in good shape for making sure we can use it for lots of different use cases down the road. She's working on making a video to explain to staff, case managers who are entering data, why it's important to enter it in a particular way. And it's just it's a much more fun way to interact about a topic that might feel kind of boring when you can make a fun little video about it. Okay, I went on too long, but you might have follow-up questions, or I want to hear about your moment this week.
I do have follow-up questions because I've heard about HeyGen and other video generation technology, and I'm curious because I haven't tried it myself at all, and I haven't seen its output. So if I am trying to create a training video, or I'm imagining, teaching law students, and I want to have some sort of asynchronous content that I post on Canvas for them, what would I do? So would I draft a script of what I want to say and then actually feed the script into the HeyGen technology?
So yes, you could do that. And that's what I think is kind of amazing, that it's that simple. If you just want it to make a short video for you based on the content that you were able to put in writing. But it has lots of other features as well that are also easy to use, and they're interactive, and it gives you choices about a particular voice you might want, language you might want, avatar you might want, and it just has, in addition to the text to speech function, translation features, like I said, a streaming feature that's kind of amazing. It's a unbelievably user-friendly tool that I think the best advice I can give you is to just go get a demo and play around with it, which is what I think we say about almost all of these tools. Because by playing around with it, you'll see what we mean. You can be, I am, unlike you, I'm basically like a middle-aged, non-tech savvy person. And the thing about this technology that's showing up in all these different use cases is it's making it available to all of us. And that's the big difference here, right? That's what we keep coming back to.
And which languages have you used? Have you tried different languages so far in your work? And how do you assess the translation?
So I haven't, and I would not be the person to be able to assess the translation, frankly, but from team members who are experimenting with the translation, because we do have users who need to be able to understand some of what we're putting out there in their native language. They say it's excellent. And I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT also said it was excellent. So,
well, it must be excellent then.
Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. So do you see, in your role now, you're leading a huge organization that has marketing and training material for lawyers and judges in particular? How would you imagine they might use it?
Yeah, I think that's when I was thinking about this particular platform for this podcast, it just seemed to me to be a way for courts in particular to be able to put out lots of information kind of quickly and easily and in high quality and in lots of languages that right now people are trying to respond in this, one-to-one service model kind of way. That's true for lawyers as well, right? Like you could imagine lawyers being able to provide, or firms being able to provide information about the kinds of things they can do, not in the one-to-one service model that we're all used to, and therefore, reach like far more people than we can reach right now. For courts, that's critical, right? Courts just never get through the questions that they have from the public, and a public who, for the most part, can't afford lawyers. So I think it could be like a tremendous tool for an innovative court administrator who said, I really want to be able to make sure our court can answer any question anybody has in our community about any service. It could be a wonderful way to really serve the public for a court that was focused on really upping its game.
That's so cool. And I could imagine combining, if you took FAQs, if you're a court administrator and you have FAQs on hand for procedural rules, administrative things, especially with self-represented litigants, and you fed it into a video generation platform, and then you created a kiosk in the, lobby of the courthouse where people could pick the language that they speak and need to know the answer in, or on the court's website, that could be amazing and transformative, right?
Yeah, I mean, the kiosks are important because sometimes people think they have to go to court to figure these things out. But I think the more if courts put it on their websites and figure out a way to like get that information into people's hands before they have to come to court, even better, right? And I think this technology gives you an opportunity to do that. I think it's a pretty great platform, and I think people are going to find great use cases with it.
That's very cool. And I can also see, the flip side of everything we talk about is the training model and the different ways that we can create differentiated content for people who learn in different ways. I could imagine educational and training offerings that meet different populations of learners in a way that they really prefer by having different videos present to them. I don't even know what that would look like, but that was the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, our education team is playing with it, and they think it's so much more user friendly for the video content that they're creating. But you're right, it's also going to be a lot easier to put together individualized learning modules. It just makes it really simple, and that's exciting, I think.
Very cool. Okay, so that was a great Gen AI moment for this week. And as you were talking about translation, I realized that my Gen AI moment this week came from an experience with a language I don't speak. My good friend is from Germany. She and I speak English to one another, but her family speaks to her in German. And she sent us a text from a family member in German, and I had no idea what it meant. So I typed in, the German into generative AI, into Claude, and it immediately translated it. But I wanted to know from her whether it translated it correctly. And she wrote back that it had translated it perfectly. So I thought that was very cool. And to imagine traveling around the world to lots of different places where I don't speak the language and being able to take a screenshot of a menu or a sign in a train station and be able to instantly translate is incredible to me. And the other example I have a few, but I'll save a few for our next edition. But this is a very silly example. But I never cook on my own outside of like meal delivery kits. But I was trying to make bechamel sauce for pasta, and I was all excited. But then I realized I didn't have any dairy milk on hand, but I did have almond milk, and I wasn't sure whether almond milk would be something I could use to make bechamel. So I asked Claude. And I expected it just to say, yes, you can use it as a substitute, but instead it said, yes, you can. And here's a revised recipe for how you would incorporate almond milk instead of dairy milk. I did make it with almond milk. I don't know that it was the best bechamel sauce I've ever had, but it was definitely usable and edible. But I thought that next step, sort of providing me with a recipe, was super interesting, and it adjusted the times and the things that I would have to do, and it talked about the difference between the almond milk and the dairy milk in preparation. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Wait, which platform did you use for that? Claude again? Did you use Claude?
Claude.
You did. Interesting. Yeah. And are you using Claude now? Like, is that your first go-to nowadays? mostly.
Claude's always my first go-to, except for tech support. I find it's not very good at tech support. I use a platform called Buffer for scheduling social media posts, and it doesn't allow you to tag people. So you draft it, and it automatically sends it when you schedule it. But it doesn't allow you to tag people in your post. So when it goes up, it looks a little silly because it just has that @ sign when you're trying to tag someone. So I went into Claude and asked why that was the case, and it didn't have any answers. It just said, I don't know anything about LinkedIn. But I went into ChatGPT and asked it, and it always has the answers for my tech questions. And the answer in that case was that it's not a feature that you can actually enable because of the interface, I guess, between these external platforms and LinkedIn. How about you? Are you using Claude or ChatGPT exclusively or for different purposes?
So I think I use them both a lot. I do almost always start with Claude though nowadays. I mean, we'll see when the next model of GPT comes out. Maybe that'll change again. It feels like it's a constant horse race. But I often go to both. And sometimes I'm much more satisfied with an answer on one than the other, and sometimes they're pretty similar. So they're both pretty good. But I find myself starting with Claude. In your German text case, are you using the Claude app on your phone? Did you feed it right in from your phone, or did you copy and paste it into your browser? Like how are you actually doing it? I think this is a question you get on the road some.
Yeah, I was on my computer when the text came in, and I have a Mac. So the text come through to my screen. I took a screenshot, but I was careful to eliminate any identifying data because I don't want to ever put in anybody's information. And I thought about that a lot, and I think we'll have to continue thinking about that. So I just captured the German piece of it and took a snapshot and pasted that snapshot into Claude. And that's how I did it. I would imagine, I have not tried to use the Claude app, like uploading anything to the Claude app. I
haven't either.
using
That's why I
it.
was wondering if you had done that. I want to try. Although on the other hand, I guess if the new iPhone is going to have all of it built in, and we could just get the new iPhone this year, maybe that makes it all easy. I don't know. We'll have to play with that.
I mean, this is for another conversation, but that is the thing that I've been wondering about with all of these sort of this arms race around advancing technology. And I was listening to a conversation the other day about, what if one of these companies develops the most advanced form that you can and then just gave it away for free? Would that end the arms race essentially and capture the market? I'm not sure. But for now, for me, Claude is the language-based version or language-focused version that I use. I think the writing is incredible that comes out of Claude as compared with GPT at the moment.
Yeah, me too. I have one more really important question. What is bechamel? What sauce is that?
Oh, bechamel sauce? I don't even know if that's how it's pronounced. It's sort of like it's like a lighter version of Alfredo, I guess. It's
okay.
Although there's no cheese in it. It's sort of like butter and milk and a little bit of paprika. It's really simple, but it's sort of like a light creamy sauce that I've never made before on my own. And I just, of course, decided to make it when I had nothing on hand that you actually need to use to make it.
I mean, it sounds delicious. I just had no idea what it is, but
if you ever decide to make it, be sure to use dairy milk because almond milk is not as good. Okay, so great Gen AI moments. The other thing that we try to do on our podcast is to define some key terms that are bandied about in the LLM and AI world. And so a couple terms each episode. Two that we have today. Let's start with the first one. The first one is agentism. So Bridget, did you want to describe what agentic or agentism refers to?
Yeah, I'll do my best. And as always, please just fix whatever you think I don't get quite right. I think when we talk about agentism in the context of generative AI, we're talking about the idea where the AI system is designed to behave or operate autonomously, at least in some ways, like an agent would, and that's hence agentism, and that it has some level of kind of decision making or goal oriented action in what it does. So it's not just responding to your question, which is something that probably everybody now has had an experience with AIs doing, but actively seeking to get something done for you, like a task or a goal, using techniques that it knows how to use, like reinforcement learning or other forms of behavior that the AI has been taught to do. And I think it's a concept that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it's also a concept that seems to me, in following where this market is headed, like we're going to be talking more and more about in the coming months and years. At least that's as I understand it. What do you think I got right or wrong there?
No, that all sounded great to me. One question I have, just another definition, is you mentioned reinforcement learning, which is another term that comes up in these conversations. Could you describe what reinforcement learning means?
Yeah, so that I think it's sort of like fine tuning, but it's like at least that's what my engineers say. It's like they spend a lot more time than they do coding the whatever we're building, teaching it yes or no in what it's doing. So it learns how to do it better on its own, basically, like teaching it how to learn on its own.
No, that sounds right to me. I mean, it's one of the sort of ways that AI really mimics humans, I think, is
Yeah,
that we also learn through reinforcement learning and being given feedback, right? And trying to get better over time and being taught how to do it on our own eventually,
yeah,
and learn the
yeah.
techniques. I don't want to over anthropomorphize the
Same.
technology, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's part of what makes it different from other technology. And the other thing I was going to add onto your great definition of agentism is I think when I think about agentism, or I hear people who host other shows talk about it, they're talking about in the future sort of like, your Gen AI would produce a travel itinerary, and instead of you having to then go on and make all the reservations, it would get your authorization and then go ahead and do those things for you, which is really advanced. But on a more simple level, they are already agentic in the sense that they're pre-trained, so their training period cuts off at a certain point. But they are now able to go out to the internet and search things and come back with more advanced understanding. So that is also agentism that already exists. And I think at the very beginning, when ChatGPT came out and you would ask it a question, it might respond, my training data cut off in, whatever it was, January 2022. I don't have any more current information. But that's no longer the case because it's already demonstrating some agentism. But that doesn't mean its training is current, if that makes sense. It's going to get new information and fold it into its response. Is that how you understand it?
Yeah, it is how I understand it. I mean, I think, we've talked about this example before of GPT-4 teaching itself to code, and I didn't really understand that wasn't something that the technologists who built GPT-4 hadn't taught it to do. But when I read like the Atlantic piece on Sam Altman, and I learned he was surprised when it started coding, I guess that's an example of it, going and learning how to do things on its own, and maybe doing those things in service of not pleasing, because it doesn't really please. I feel like we're totally anthropomorphizing the technology a lot today, but
Yes.
in service of the user asking it to do things. So yeah, I think that's what agentism means. How about structured versus unstructured data, which again feel like terms that 2 years ago I don't think I might have heard once a year, and now I feel like I hear every other day. So what do we mean by those?
Yeah, and was even more ignorant about it. I don't think I ever really thought about it. And the first person I heard talk about it was Darth Vaughn when he came and did a presentation for us about why generative technologies will change the legal profession. And it was sort of like one of those light bulb moments for me. My understanding is that structured versus unstructured data refers to, the way I think about it is we used to have all these data entry roles where you were taking data and entering it into fields for spreadsheets, for example. And until you created structure around the data that you were using, it was unusable. And unstructured data is the reverse, which is sort of the way that we normally communicate in documents and text-heavy files. That one of the reasons that Gen AI could be such a breakthrough is that we can actually use that unstructured data now to make predictive outcomes from it or ask it questions and talk to it, which was impossible to do before. But I want to stop and see if my understanding is aligned with yours and get any feedback from you and reinforcement learning from you about whether I understand it correctly.
No, I think that's right. I think of structured data as data that's like organized in a predefined format. You think of Excel spreadsheets and databases, like you were saying, and they're easily searchable, and you can analyze them, and you can see why they can, that data is easy to train an algorithm, and so you can imagine financial records or inventory data, or even in the legal context, opinions are somewhat structured, right? There's usually they follow a format. Statutes are somewhat structured, and West and our other legal overlords have structured them even more sometimes, right? They've like really put them in a format that makes them searchable. And I think of unstructured data as emails and audio recordings and social media posts and the kinds of things, the ways in which we like live our lives in words, either in writing or in speaking, that all of a sudden that data is now valuable in the context of this technology. That unstructured data is now valuable in the context of this technology.
Yeah. I'm going to oversimplify it even more and take us to my favorite store, which is the Container Store. And I think of structured data as like the little jewelry organizers that have a tiny little spot for every single thing you own. And unstructured data is like the kids' toy organizers, where it's just a big thing where you could throw everything in and make use of it and keep it organized. That's how I think of structured versus unstructured data. Like we could throw a whole lot of stuff in there, but it no longer means that it's a complete mess. It's actually something usable.
The Container Store is an amazing store. Let me just say. Yeah. So
I love
good.
it.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time at the Container Store.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next section, another thing that we do, we get a chance to talk to lots of different groups, most of whom are too busy in their day-to-day to be thinking about generative AI, but recognize that it's important in the legal field. So we wanted to share some questions that we get on the road and our answers to those. And one, I was presenting recently and felt a little bit badly that somebody raised their hand after an hour-long discussion about all these different topics. And I was talking about Claude this and Claude that. And they said, where do you actually access these things? Like, where is Claude? Where is ChatGPT? So where can we find them, Bridget?
Yeah. So this is interesting. I don't need you to tell me, like, don't tell me who the person was, but was it a legal audience? I'm just curious about who was asking. It was a legal audience. Yeah.
It was a legal audience, but and this will get into our next question. They're not a legal audience. So these are solo practitioners and small firms where there is not an IT team in-house thinking about these things or doing training on them. It tends to be people that are working really, really hard all day with the technology they have and haven't yet even thought about these things.
Yeah, so I think it's a totally fair question. It makes me think. It's a great question, and the answer is you can literally go to Google and put in Claude, and you will come up with the Claude website, and you will be able to use it for free or buy a subscription for. Mine comes in at like $21.79 a month now. I feel like there's like a little bit of tax or something. It's $20 a month basically. Which I highly recommend. I think the subscription version is incredible, and really, really, really gives you the kind of introduction to the technology if you haven't played with it yet. But yeah, go right to your browser and type in Claude. You will absolutely find it. Same with ChatGPT. You try to not find it. You will find it just by using your Google machine. I will tell you one of the things. I mean, this is a Gen AI moment, so I'm circling back, but it'll be really fast. I now use Claude and ChatGPT the way I used to use Google. Like my habits have changed completely, and I start questions when I'm like trying to figure out something about like where I'm headed with putting something together for various tasks. I start now there and not in Google. But because you, dear audience member who needs to know where to find Claude, haven't done that yet, go to Google, put in Claude, and get your Claude account started and start playing with it.
And the other question during the same conversation was for solo practitioners and small firms. Large firms may have resources to be buying legal specific technology like Harvey, like co-counsel. What would your advice be to small firms and solo practitioners who don't have those resources and they don't have technical expertise in house? Where do they get started?
One of the things that I think is really exciting about this moment is there everybody is basically in the same place right now. So I think first of all, even if you are in a small firm or a solo practice, you will learn quickly how using the technology saves you time. I know you feel like you have no time because you have so much to do in a small firm when you're doing all of it yourself. You don't have a marketing department or a IS department. But you will quickly see how much time these tools save you. And then there are these resources that Jen and I have talked about, and we will continue to put in the show notes or post about, where you can learn pretty quickly, kind of updates week to week. I don't know, what do you tell people in small firms or solo practice who are looking to figure out how they can at least get competent?
Yeah, I mean, my first piece of advice is don't try to buy Harvey or co-counsel. You're not going to be able to afford it, right? And B, I think the cost of all of these technologies will come down over time. So I think it's less important to learn the legal specific technologies and more important to develop just a muscle for understanding what they can do currently. And like you're saying, I mean, I just offer, examples of downloading the most recent Supreme Court case and opinion, something that's publicly available. There's nothing sensitive about it. Read it yourself as a lawyer, understand it as a lawyer would, and then upload it to one of these platforms and talk to it, ask it questions, ask it to summarize the opinion, see if you agree or disagree with the summary. I find increasingly they're pretty accurate, at least in summary. And then, if you have extra time, pretend you're preparing for an appellate argument about that case and ask the technology, to serve in the role of a judge who's challenging you on how this applies to your case. And you can change the personality of it. You can engage with it in lots of different ways and just play around with it that way. And then I think for the administrative side of your work, and the non-sensitive pieces of your work, like marketing or, drafting an email to somebody that's not privileged or confidential, finding ways that you can adjust the tone to make it more diplomatic, to make it funnier. I mean, just playing around with it, I think at this stage is just as valuable a use of time, probably more than trying to figure out where it integrates in your legal practice right now.
I remember us talking about a small firm, maybe even a solo practitioner who had an appellate argument in a state appellate court, who fed the publicly available documents, the briefs that were filed with the court, up into, I think it was just GPT, and had the LLM ask him questions as if it were the appellate court, and he answered the questions and had it write a decision, and it guided him in how he made his formal presentation, and he said it was an enormous help. And here's where it's still democratized, because you're right that the legal tools are still, there's some pricing issues, and I think that will change. But right now, Catherine Forrest, who's a partner at Paul Weiss, who's, a real, I think, leader in technology and generative AI, she does the same thing when she has an argument. So you can be a small practitioner, a solo practitioner in Pennsylvania doing an appellate argument before a state appellate court, or you can be Catherine Forrest preparing an argument for the Ninth Circuit, and you have access to the same tools. So I think starting to figure out the ways in which it can already help you is the first piece of advice.
Totally agree. And yes, that example you're recalling, I remember that lawyer saying that he can't, prove that ChatGPT helped him win oral argument, but he did win an oral argument. And he did say that it was much more helpful in terms of preparing him and thinking through some things that he wouldn't have thought through before, some new questions, that kind of thing.
One question I'm curious about, Jen, is whether you have any advice for solos or small firm lawyers about whether there are resources or communities where they could go for crowdsourcing information about this technology that might be especially useful for their practices? What kind of advice would you give to them if they were looking for that information?
Yeah, I think if I were a solo or small firm practitioner, I would start with my local bar association and see what conversations are happening and if there are any educational resources available. I know some are starting to have panel discussions with, some leading thinkers locally about how to use the technology. I'd also leverage social media. I actually think social media is a much better way to learn about this tech than waiting for the next edition of whatever legal resource you consume, periodical type resource. Hop on LinkedIn and find some people in the legal tech community. Bob Ambrogi is a great resource to follow around legal tech. Nikki Shaver is another great resource, and I follow her. Are there people on LinkedIn and social media that you follow that might be helpful for anybody getting started?
We've mentioned Jordan before, but I think Jordan Furlong is, really, really worth a follow if you're thinking about the future of the legal profession and legal tech and legal education, frankly. I'm not sure it's especially helpful for small and solos, although I think a lot of what Jordan is thinking about and writing about is very hopeful for small firms and solo practitioners, given all the changes that are out there. So, I know everybody is short on time, but I would subscribe to Jordan's Substack and follow Jordan. And I've said this before as well, but I find that following people who are not necessarily in legal is quite useful with this technology, because it's surprising to me how much there is to learn from other disciplines that are maybe diving into use cases with the technology a little faster, and turns out they're not necessarily that different from us. So again, we say every week following Paul Reitzer and Mike Caput is worth doing. And I would always follow Ethan Mollick to sort of be learning what's happening with the technology.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing, I know, some groups can get very overwhelmed pretty quickly with the technology. And we've talked before about how this is an intelligent, educated community and we shouldn't feel overwhelmed. But just to counter that or temper it a little bit, I would say, too, that I expect that this era where we're all trying to find the different platforms in their most recent iterations and which one compares to the others and which way will end at some point. Or at least recede in its importance, because a lot of this technology will become infused and integrated into the tech that you're already using in your practice. So while I think it's really important to think about how it could transform your practice, and I think for solos and smalls, the transformative power is huge. The ability to grow the service you provide, to open up new markets for you is enormous. And we've talked about that before. But I wouldn't necessarily try to boil the ocean and try to learn everything that you can about generative AI, because I think it will arrive to you in a more consumable way sooner than later.
Yeah, I think that's right. The products are going to settle out. And so you don't have to necessarily figure out the legal products. I would be learning as much as you can about what the possibilities are. That's, I think, probably more important than figuring out which products are going to work for your practice today.
And we've talked about tools and resources, but I think mindset is really key. I met a woman last week. I thought she was amazing. She was 80 years old. She was a psychologist and a lawyer by training, and she was taking all of this handwritten material that she had drafted throughout her entire career that was not sensitive and trying to figure out how to use it to create guides for other people who wanted to have a career like that. And I think to be 80 years old and be not only, not dismissive of the technology, but actively embracing it, that's what I love to see. I just think that's so inspiring. So I think just having an open mind about it and spending less time sort of debating whether technology will change the world, it always does, and more time figuring out how you can make sure you harness it for good.
Yeah, and you have the power to do that no matter what your practice is, right? It's like you can put your head in the sand, you can hold on with both hands to what you have, what we all have today, or you can have a growth mindset. And I think people who have a growth mindset right now are the ones who are going to have a more satisfying and probably, more successful practice tomorrow. So growth mindset is the whole ballgame.
Totally. Plus, it's just so much fun to
Way
learn
more fun.
every day. Way more fun. So next time, Bridget, I'm really excited, especially given your deep background as a judge, to dive into some topics that are emerging in the courts and for judges, for clerks, for court administrators, and for lawyers who practice before those tribunals. And I think we'll do at least 2 episodes on some of those topics, maybe more because they keep proliferating. But we hope you'll join us next time for some of those great conversations and Bridget's wise expertise and thoughts on that area.
Yep, looking forward to that. That'll be fun.
Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI-driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.